Praise be our Lord Jesus Christ. In a recent interesting interview on Fox News, titled The Church of Environmentalism, journalist Tucker Carlson has brought to light a contradiction that may have escaped the notice of many people, but which I consider extremely revealing. Carlson recalls that the American Constitution prohibits any state religion, but for some time the governing Democratic Party has imposed on the American people the globalist cult, with its green agenda, its woke dogmas, its condemnation and cancel culture, its priests of the World Health Organization, the prophets of the World Economic Forum. A religion in all respects, all-encompassing not only for the life of the individuals who practice it, but also in the life of the nation that publicly confesses it, adapts law and sentences to it, and inspires education and every governmental action around it. In the name of the globalist religion, its adherents demand that all citizens behave in accordance with the morality of the New World Order, accepting uncritically and with an attitude of devout submission to religious authority, the doctrine defined ex cathedra by the Davos Synodine. Citizens are not required merely to share the motivation that justify the health, economic, or social policies imposed by government, but to give their blind and irrational assent, which goes far beyond faith. For this reason, it is not allowed to contest the psychopandemic, criticize the management of the vaccination campaign, argue the groundlessness of climate alarms, oppose the evidence of NATO's provocation of the Russian Federation with the Ukrainian crisis, ask for investigation into Hunter Biden's laptop, or the electoral fraud that prevented President Trump from remaining in the White House, or refuse to stand by as children are corrupt with the LGBTQ obscenities. After 3 years of follies, incomprehensible to a rational mind, but amply justifiable in a perspective of blind fideism, the proposal formulated by the American Clinic to ask patients to give up part of their anesthesia so as to reduce their trace of carbon dioxide and save the planet should therefore not be read as a grotesque pretext to reduce hospital expenses to the detriment of patients, but as a religious act, a penance to be accepted willingly, an ethical, meritorious act. The penitential character is indispensable in this operation of forced conversion to the masses, because it counterbalances the absurdity of the action with the reward of the promised good. Wear the mask, which is useless, the citizen, religious adherent, has made his own gesture of submission, has offered himself to the divinity, the state, and the community. A submission confirmed with the equally public act of vaccination, which represented a sort of baptism in the globalist faith, the initiation into worship. The high priests of this religion have even reached the point of theorizing human sacrifice by means of abortion and euthanasia. A sacrifice required by the common good, so as not to overpopulate the planet, burden public health, or be a burden on social security. Even the mutilation to which those who profess gender doctrine are subjected, and the deprivation of the reproductive faculties induced by homosexuality are nothing more than forms of sacrifice and immolation of oneself and one's body, one's health, including life itself, receiving, for example, an experimental gene therapy demonstrably dangerous and often deadly. Adherence to globalism is not an optional. It is the state religion, and the state tolerates no practitioners to the extent that their presence does not prevent society from exercising this cult. Indeed, it is presumption of being legitimized by ethical principles to impose on citizens what represent an incontestable superior good. The state also obliges dissenters to perform the basic act of globalist morality, punishing them if they do not conform to his precepts. Eating insect and not meat, injecting drugs instead of practicing healthy life, using electricity instead of gasoline, renouncing private property and freedom of movement, enduring controls and limitation of fundamental rights, accepting the worst moral and sexual deviation in the name of freedom, renouncing the family to live isolated, without inheriting anything from the past and without transmitting anything to posterity, erasing one's identity in the name of political correctness, denying the Christian faith to embrace woke superstition, conditioning one's work and one's subsistence to respect absurd rules. All these are elements destined to become part of the daily life of individual, a life based on an ideological model that on closer inspection no one wants, no one has asked for, and that justifies its existence only with the boogeyman of an unproven and improbable ecological apocalypse. This violates not only the much vaunted freedom of religion on which this society is founded, but want to lead us step by step, inexorably, to the point of making this cult exclusive and the only one allowed. The Church of the Environmentalism defines itself as inclusive, but does not tolerate dissent. does not accept dialectically engaging with those who question his dictates. Those who do not accept the anti-gospel of Davos are ipso facto heretics and must therefore be punished, excommunicated, separated from the social body, and considered public enemies. They must be re-educated by force, both through an incessant hammering of the media and also through the imposition of a social stigma and truly extortive forms of consent, starting with the informed consent of submitting against their will to the vaccination obligation and continuing in the madness of the so-called City of 15 Minutes, which is anticipated, moreover, in detail in the programmatic points of the 2030 agenda, which are ultimately dogmatic canons to the contrary. The problem with this disturbing phenomenon of mass superstition is that this state religion has not been imposed de facto only in the United States of America, but it has also spread to all the nations of the world, of the Western world especially, whose leaders were converted to the globalist world by the great apostle of the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, its self-proclaimed Pope, who is therefore invested with an infallible and incontestable authority. And so, as in the Annuario Pontificio, we can read the list of cardinals, bishops, and prelates of the Roman Curia, and the dioceses spread throughout the world. So on the website of the World Economic Forum, we find the list of prelates of globalism, from Justin Trudeau to Emmanuel Macron, discovering that not only the president and prime ministers of many states belongs to this church, but also numerous officials, head of the international body, and major multinational corporations, and members of the media. To this must also be added the preachers and the missionaries who work for the spread of the globalist faith, actors, singers, influencers, sportsmen, intellectuals, doctors, teachers. A very powerful, highly organized network, widespread not only at the top of institutions, but also in university and courts, in companies and hospitals, in the peripheral bodies and local municipalities, in cultural and sport associations, so that it is impossible to escape indoctrination, even in a provincial primary school or in a small rural community. It is disconcerting, you must admit, that in the number of converts to the universal religion, we can also count exponents of the world religions, and among them even Jorge Mario Bergoglio, whom Catholics also consider head of the Church of Rome. With all the cowardliness of ecclesiastic faithful to him, the apostasy of the Catholic hierarchy has reached the point of worshipping the idol of the Pachamama, the Mother Earth, demonic personification of ecumenical, inclusive and sustainable Amazonian globalism. But was it not John Podesta himself who advocated the advent of a springtime of the Church that would replace its doctrine with a vague environmentalism sentimentality, finding prompt execution of his hopes in the coordinated action that led to the resignation of Benedict XVI and the election of Bergoglio? What we are witnessing is nothing more than the reverse application of the process that led to the spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire and then throughout the world. A sort of revenge of barbarism and paganism on the faith of Christ. What Julian the Apostate tried to do in the 4th century, that is to restore the cult of pagan gods, today is pursued zealously by new apostates, all united by the sacred fury that make them as dangerous as they are convinced of being able to succeed in their intention because of the endless means at their disposal. In reality, this religion is nothing more than a modern incarnation of the cult of Lucifer. The recent satanic performance at the Grammy Awards, sponsored by Pfizer, is only the latest confirmation of an adherence to an infernal world that until now had been silenced because it was still considered unmentionable. It is no mystery that the ideologues of the globalist thought are all indistinctly anti-Christian and anti-clerical, significantly hostile to Christian morality, ostentatiously opposed to the civilization and culture that the gospel has shaped in 2,000 years of history. Not only that, the inextinguishable hatred toward life, toward all that is work of the Creator, from man to nature, reveal the attempt, almost successful, all by delirious, that tamper with the order of creation, to modify plants and animals, to change the very human DNA through bioengineering intervention, to deprive man of his individuality and his free will, making controllable and even maneuverable through the transhumanism. At the bottom of all this, there is the hatred of God and envy for the supernatural faith that He has reserved for men by redeeming them from sin with the sacrifice of the cross of His Son. This satanic hatred is expressed in the determination to make it impossible for Christians to practice their religion, to see its principle respected, to be able to make their contribution in society, and ultimately in the will to induce them to do evil, or at least to ensure that they cannot do good, much less spread it. And if they do, to distort their original motivation, love of God and neighbor, by perverting them with pitifully philanthropic or environmentalist purposes. all the precepts of the globalist religion are a counterfeit version of the Ten Commandments, their grotesque inversion, an obscene reversal. In practice, they use the same means that the Church has used for evangelization, but with the aim of damning souls and subjecting them not to the law of God, but to the tyranny of the devil, under the inquisitorial control of the anti-church of Satan. In this perspective, the American Secret Services are also reporting on groups of traditional Catholic faithful, confirming that the enmity between the seed of the woman and that of the serpent is a theological reality in which the enemies of God believe above all, and that one of the signs of the end times is precisely the abolition of the holy sacrifice of the Mass and the presence of the abomination of desolation in the temple. The attempt to suppress or limit the traditional Mass unite deep church and deep state, revealing the essentiality Luciferian matrix of both, because both know very well what are the infinite graces that pour out on the Church and on the world through that Mass. They want to prevent those graces from being given, so that they do not hinder their plans. They show it to us themselves. Our battle is not only against creatures of flesh and blood. Tucker Carlson observation highlights the deception to which we are subjected daily by our rulers. The theoretical imposition of the secularism of the state has served to eliminate the presence of the true God from the institutions, while the practical imposition of the globalist religion serves to introduce Satan into the institutions, with the aim of establishing that dystopian new world order in which the Antichrist will claim to be worshipped as God, in his mad delirium to replace our Lord. The wording of the book of Revelation take on ever great concreteness, the more the plan proceeds to subject all men to a control that prevents any possibility of disobedience and resistance. Only now do we understand what it means not to be able to buy or sell without the green pass, which is nothing if not the technological version of the mark with the number of the beast. But if not everyone is yet ready to recognize the error of having abandoned Christ in the name of a corrupt and deceptive freedom, thus as hidden, unspeakable intention, I believe that today many are ready, psychologically even before rationally, to take note of that the coup d'etat which a lobby of dangerous fanatics is managing to take power in the United States and in the world, determined to make any move, even the most reckless, in order to maintain it. To a twist of providence, the secularism of the state, which in itself offends God, because it denies him the public worship to which he is sovereign, could be the argument with which to put an end to the subversive project of the Great Reset. If Americans, and with them the people of the whole world, can rebel against this forced conversion, demanding that citizens' representatives in position of government be accountable to the holders of national sovereignty and not to the leaders of the globalist Sanhedrin, it will perhaps be possible to put a stop to this race toward the abyss. But to do so requires the awareness that this will be only first phase in the process of liberation from this infernal lobby, which must be followed by the reappropriation of those moral principles proper to Christianity that constitute the foundation of the Western civilization and the most effective defense against the barbarism of the neo-paganism. For too long, citizens and faithful have passively suffered the decision of their political and religious leaders in the face of evidence of their betrayal. Respect for authority is based on the recognition of a theological fact, that is, the lordship of Jesus Christ over individuals, nations, and the Church. If those in authority in the state and the Church act against the citizens and the faithful, their power is usurped, their authority null and void. Let us not forget that rulers are not the owners of the state and the master of the citizens, just as the Pope and the Bishop are not the owner of the Church and the masters of the faithful. If they not want to be like fathers to us, if they do not want our good, and indeed do everything to corrupt us in body and spirit, it is time to drive them out of their position and call them to account for their betrayal, their crimes, and their scandalous lies.